Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of What Do You Think? My name is Bill Morse, and this is Oliver. And today is Thursday, July 21st, 2022. Last week during the program, I mentioned that we would talk about the World Economic Forum, otherwise known as the WEF. And if you have seen this program in the past, over the past couple of months, you know that we have paid some attention to the yearly meetings in Davos, Switzerland, of the World Economic Forum. And the financier, or the finance person that runs the World Economic Forum, his name is Klaus Schwab. And the importance of his influence on world leaders, younger world leaders, we're going to make evident, hopefully, over the course of the next 15, 20 minutes. I wanted to do a little housekeeping first to make some announcements. First off, at the Rockingham Library this Monday, coming Monday, at 6:30, there's going to be a presentation by local candidates, Democratic candidates for local offices, representatives and state senators. And it's going to be, again, this coming Monday at 6:30 at the Rockingham Public Library. Everyone is invited to attend. And after we finish our discussion, you may consider actually showing up and asking questions. Some of the questions are pre-submitted, but I'm assuming that there will be an open question and answer period that follows. Another event that I want to bring your attention to is on the 30th of July, which is the Saturday after this coming Saturday, a week from this Saturday. This Saturday is the 23rd, so the 30th is next Saturday, following Saturday. And at the Living Hope Fellowship Church, which is north of Bellows Falls on Route 5, the left-hand side opposite the roadway, and there will be a forum of local Republican candidates. These are for the statewide offices of U.S. Senate and Congress. And I believe there will also be the lieutenant governor and the governor candidates represented as well. This will be Republican candidates. And both sides, both sides, Democrat and Republican, are preparing for a primary which will be August 9th, Tuesday, August 9th. And if you're not registered to vote, I would ask that you register to vote and please consider voting in the primary according to the party that you're affiliated with, Democrat or Republican. Independent candidates, we will have a chance to vote for them in the general election, which will be Tuesday, November 8th. So, I wanted to bring up a couple of news items regarding the World Economic Forum. as I said before, there are some world events that are happening because of certain measures that the WEF has been supporting. And the last yearly summit meeting held in Davos was this past May, and we did talk about it. I mentioned that for the first time that I'm aware of, a representative from the state of Vermont, one of our two senators, Patrick Leahy, showed up in the workshop or the seminar called The View from the Hill, along with other U.S. elected representatives and senators. I believe Senator Joe Manchin was also there from West Virginia, as well as others from different states. There were about 12 of them in all. And I found it interesting that Senator Patrick Leahy had attended, especially since he's has decided not to run for re-election. Right now, the Democrat Peter Welch is running to fill Patrick Leahy's seat in the Senate. And the Republicans also have a couple of candidates that will be whittled down to one after the primary results are known. So, the WEF, or World Economic Forum, we talked about them also besides the yearly meetings. We covered briefly for a couple of weeks the book, The Great Reset, which was written by Klaus Schwab and another gentleman whose name escapes me. I think it was April or May of 2020 that the book, The Great Reset, was published. The COVID pandemic was only a couple of months old, and the reset was the opportunity that the COVID restrictions, lockdowns, and mandates afforded a reset or a redirection of world resources and world efforts in so far as technology, in so far as climate change, in so far as reducing the population, in so far as improving health through these guidelines that were sponsored or promoted by the World Economic Forum. And the forum has been around since '77. It's an older organization. And about 20 years ago, they started actively training young people who were involved or thinking of getting involved with politics, either on their own or through a relation, such as Justin Trudeau, his father being Pierre Trudeau, who was a former Prime Minister of Canada. Justin Trudeau was one of the persons that went through training at the World Economic Forum, future leaders training or future leaders seminars. And as the son of a former prime minister, they saw him as a person that could be relied upon to reflect and put into place through governance values that the World Economic Forum espoused or supported. We have other people besides Justin Trudeau who went through this Young Future Leaders initiative, sponsored by Klaus Schwab, and they are Boris Johnson, who recently resigned from being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom or Great Britain, Angela Merkel, who is the former Chancellor of Germany, Emmanuel Macron, who was recently re-elected as the President of France, and Mark Rutte, who is the current Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Now, this last person, Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister, was in the day a pet student at the World Economic Forum's school in Switzerland for future young leaders. And he was perhaps the favorite of Charles Schwab. And in aligning his policies that he pushed through the Dutch Parliament with the vision that Klaus Schwab has for the world, he has started placing into the agricultural sector of the Dutch economy certain measures in the name of protecting or fighting climate change. Some of these measures have met with some resistance, and the resistance has been largely unreported or barely reported in Western mainstream media. I'm talking about the farmers' protests over the government's plans to reduce the emissions of nitrogen through farming practices by a certain level in order to meet standards that were set, I believe, by the United Nations, and that align with the vision that of changes that Klaus Schwab sees necessary to take place in his 2030 agenda. In other words, the World Economic Forum has set through their seminars, through their yearly summit meetings, a series of targets or agenda items that it wants to see in place by 2030. And many of them in the guise of fighting climate change or reducing the CO2, or in this case, the nitrogen footprint of farming or other human activity. So through, according to the farmers and organizations that represent the farmers in the Netherlands, and we're talking about not just people who raise cattle or raise plants, but flower growers and other people that need to have access to certain material or practices to make a living, make a profit in providing us with food in the supermarkets or flowers or other products that come out of the Netherlands. A surprisingly small country with a very dense land usage. Most of it's still agriculture. If you've ever been to the Netherlands, you'll see that there is a direct delineation between city and country, small town and country. They do not have the suburban sprawl that we unfortunately have here in this country, because even though they do use cars, they have excellent public transportation, and people are encouraged to take this good transportation system. And also they just don't have the land for acres and acres of parking lots. So you have either industrial, commercial development, residential development, and then you have agriculture, and of course they do have natural parks. But the agriculture is very densely used, and given the small size of the country, it produces enough food to export to other countries. Not just food, but flowers, as I've mentioned before. So this nitrogen initiative that Mark Rutte has pushed through with the support and the backing of the World Economic Forum, which also has a very strong influence on what the United Nations does, is enforcing or planning to enforce this nitrogen curbing initiative. And according to the farmers, about 30 to 40% of them will be driven out of business and their farms will close. And that will exasperate the food supply chain. And so it's a case of the cure killing the patient, so to speak. And it's just one example of the connection between the goals of the World Economic Forum set for 2030 and the impact these goals have once they've passed through the local legislature and they've been pushed through and they're about to take effect. So, and as a side note, on Saturday, this coming Saturday, the 23rd, there will be protests in Canada in solidarity with the Dutch farmers. I know there have been protests in solidarity with the Dutch farmers in Germany, in Italy, also in France and Spain. There have been simultaneous protests. Other farmers in these neighboring countries are also protesting on behalf of these farmers because they know that if they remain silent in face of a threat to a neighboring farmers, that it's only a matter of time before the threat comes home in the guise of fighting climate change. So Canada, Europe, I believe that's the extent of the protests right now. It was interesting. I saw photographs of, snapshots, I guess they're called, of 1,000 tractors descending around the House of Parliament in The Hague, which is the seat of the government in the Netherlands, and stopping things. Kind of like a sit-in of tractors. And again, these movements, these grassroots movements by the farmers are not being reported by Western media. Basically because our media is owned by 6 or 7 corporations, and these corporations basically support the goals of the World Economic Forum. And so why should they report news to the contrary, news that falls outside of the official narrative? We have here in Vermont, we are not facing these types of restrictions or proposed legislation. I think we are facing some potentially dangerous legislation that has been passed, some of it over the veto of Governor Phil Scott. I'll just mention 2 bits of legislation. One is the Clean Heat Bill. And that was passed, I believe, in 2020 over Governor Phil Scott's veto. And in it, we are looking at basically a CO2 or a carbon dioxide tax, carbon footprint tax placed on fossil fuels. And the effect on this has already been felt in fuel oil for heating our homes. And the fuel oil price, I believe now, is about $5.30 a gallon, and it's expected to go further up. And the idea here is to squeeze people economically to the point where they are looking for alternate sources of energy for heating their homes. Right now, that alternate source of energy that's being proposed as a way of fighting climate change is electricity. Doing away with propane, that's a fossil fuel, and heating oil, number 2, heating oil, also a fossil fuel. The idea that electricity is not only going to heat our homes at a much elevated cost, but also eventually be used in the form of electric vehicles, puts a rather large load on the electric grid. And as has happened in California, where there are such carbon taxes already in use, the fossil fuel prices, heating oil, propane, natural gas, have risen, doubled or tripled. People are being encouraged to, through basically taxation to forego their cars and use electric vehicles. In other words, internal combustion engine, which burns gasoline, is to be replaced through economic pressure by electric vehicles. And in California, they're finding out now that these electric cars that are already on the roads, they're charging stations, and then the electricity demand through heating and cooling homes, heating and cooling or heating water, for example, is beyond the means, beyond the capacity of the currently existing grid, the electric grid. And so you have rolling blackouts in California, or the potential for rolling blackouts should the usage of electricity continue to rise because of the pushing aside or non-use of fossil fuels. So, and as part of this program of promoting clean, so-called clean fuels or cleaner fuels, there will be a partial ban of, or partial ban, how should I say this? There's going to be the start of limitations on which internal combustion engines will be allowed to be used after 2026. I'm not sure which vehicles will be. Imagine cars will start. There will be more pressure on cars, eventually trucks, and by 2035, according to the program that Vermont has signed up for, again over the governor's veto, is total phase out of the internal combustion engine by 2035, and a use of just renewable energy. So in other words, no more fossil fuel being used to produce electricity. It's been said that that we do not have enough land here in Vermont to cover with solar panels and wind turbines sufficient to maintain the amount of electricity that we use at current levels. So I think this is something that needs to be discussed openly, and with the people that are running for re-election, people that voted for the clean heat bill, that voted for these transportation standards that will limit by 2024 and then outright ban the use of internal combustion engines. So in other words, the trucks that will be delivering our groceries, the trucks that will be working on our highways, are they going to be electric vehicles? If you've ever seen an earth mover, something that is capable of hauling loads of gravel or rock the size of a house away, uses diesel fuel. Now, are we going to be in a position to have those vehicles electrically operated, and how will we supply the charge needed to keep those batteries in operational condition? So none of these questions, as far as I know, have been answered. If I'm hoping that this will come to discussion before we have the election on November 8th, perhaps by August 9th. These are questions that need to be answered by the people who have so far supported these California-style initiatives, whereby we're dealing with so-called renewable energy. And that can be a misnomer, because if you're recharging a battery, where does the electricity come from that provides the charge at the charging station for an electric vehicle. What's powering the power plant that's producing the energy. I'm hoping that we go at this through a more gradual process whereby we do not have to shut down the economy through limiting the amount of energy available and put the comfort of people's homes at jeopardy. Germany is actually going through a similar situation here in having to deal with the lack of gas and oil from Russia. As you know, the Germans have a series of embargoes against Russia because of the war in the Ukraine. And Russia has retaliated by making energy kind of the pawn in this chess game. And Russia or Putin effectively has said, all right, if you want to continue arming the Ukrainian armed forces through NATO or other military suppliers or forces, then we're going to shut off the amount of gas and oil that we send to you, and you can find other sources of energy to keep your homes warm this winter, and to provide hot water, and to power your trucks, your trains, and your private cars, buses, etc. And they don't have that. They don't have that because they've gone ahead and they've shut down their nuclear power plants, not just in Germany, but also in France. France, not such an acute situation because they haven't gone, they're part of the European Union, so they are behind NATO. Emmanuel Macron obviously is no friend to Vladimir Putin as well. Interestingly enough, Vladimir Putin, I think about 20 years ago, was also a visitor of the World Economic Forum in Davos, and had gone through the program, and at a later stage decided to not go along with the global agenda set by the World Economic Forum for 2030. And so, and Macron, of course, sees globalism as the solution to all the problems that the world has been suffering over the last 100 years or so. Anyway, so we'll see. Again, this has to be discussed beyond sound bites, beyond chants or mantras, beyond signs that are being held in a protest march. This can be either handled sensibly, in my opinion, through measured responses instead of an all or nothing approach of no internal combustion, no fossil fuels by a certain date, come hell or high water, even if it means people on a fixed income spend the winter in a cold house, or because of the fuel cost increase, buy less groceries because they've gone up 10-20% in costs and price. We don't hear that discussed. I have not heard that discussed by only a select few candidates. And of course, this has not been discussed at all in mainstream media. And it needs to be. Climate change is real, it does happen. Our role, our human role in it, depends on who you ask, which group of scientists you ask, whether or not we have as much an impact on the environment as has been proposed. But I think that play it on the safe side, we should look into this further, and we should look at how we can perhaps cut down on consummation. We are a consumer-driven society, and look at other ways of powering our society without an ever-increasing demand on potentially hazardous means of drilling or pipelining. That said, it's got to be more of a worldwide effort. Vermont, even if Vermont went totally quote-unquote green with electric energy, how are you going to produce the electricity? Wind turbines, which themselves are incredibly environmentally expensive to produce, the material for the turbines, the lubrication for the turbines is fossil fuel, and solar panels, which have a limited lifespan, which eat up farmland, which we have not discovered how to dispose of. What do we do with a solar panel when it's no longer serviceable? We have no plan. That's an issue in California. They have piles of solar panels that they don't know what to do with because of the chemicals involved in their manufacture. So we have that. Also, who's making these solar panels? Many of these solar panels come from China. And again, we are reaping, I think, the repercussion or the effects of trading with a customer that uses child labor, that uses non-union help, that uses practices that are environmentally dangerous. Not exactly an equal trading partner, and hasn't been since for the last 30 years, 30, 40 years. So how do you compete as an American company with someone who is able to use prison labor, child labor, no protections for the environment or for the workforce? So, and we're, just like we did with the masks and the vaccines, we have outsourced these critical products to another country which does not share the same political or spiritual beliefs. So there's a whole whirlwind of things that have come out of us being less attentive in our trade deals, less attentive in who we are dealing with. Anyway, what other points did I want to cover here, Oliver? I put you to sleep, I'm sure. I think that's enough. On a positive note, there are things we can be doing, I think, as far as helping the environment, helping to have representatives, elected officials, more responsive to our beliefs, our values, our needs, and also to feel more connected with the people that are in Montpelier, let alone Washington, that supposedly are here to represent us and not outside interests and not outside money. When I hear that people who are running for Congress here in Vermont, certain candidates have a war chest of over $500,000, I can't believe that these are small donations from Vermonters. These are donations from national committees and from corporations, other people that are looking for something once that person comes into office. So that the person, once they come into office, be it in Montpelier or in Washington, are not beholden to us, they are beholden to special interests, and very often these special interests align with objectives set by the World Economic Forum or the United Nations or other, I would say, captive operations that are not democratically elected nor democratically responsible. So, but what we can do is we can, I believe, first we can vote in the August 9th primary, which is on Tuesday, for either a Democrat or a Republican in either the Congress, U.S. Senate, Vermont Senate, Vermont representatives, governor, lieutenant governor, I believe treasurer, and attorney general. I should know all the offices, but I've probably missed one or two. So we should vote. And how should we vote? Well, look for people, candidates that support small businesses. Small businesses have taken a direct hit from the last 2 years of lockdowns and restrictions. And I don't think it's wise practice to continually bail them out because of something that was beyond their control, something that was under the control of elected officials, the governor on down. So continue to support small farms and small businesses. I find it interesting that our small businesses were shut down, but at the same time, larger businesses like Walmart were allowed to stay open. Walmart that basically sells goods that are made halfway around the world and that are not made in this country. So support small businesses and farms, local food. We know where it comes from. We know that the food has not been genetically altered. Genetically altered food is like taking a vaccine in which you don't know what the ingredients are. You may get a side effect, you may not get a side effect later on down the line. And the side effect could sometimes be fatal, depending on your own personal health. So small farms through their organically produced produce, small businesses, people that actually employ more people, mom and pop businesses. They're the ones that occupy our downtown spaces, small shops. Perhaps if we could buy fewer things online, that would be helpful, fewer things from Amazon, and actually go into a real store when it's feasible. Learn to grow our own vegetables. Again, this goes into knowing where your food comes from, teaching children how to grow food, vegetables, or even flowers, just an appreciation for agriculture at any level, even from a potted plant. That's a start. Learn to fix stuff at home. Or, fix stuff at home. Be a little bit more self-reliant. Instead of buying something new that's only programmed to last a couple of years, try to fix something that's old that could be used for 10, 20 years. There's a saying that if you have something good, it should last a lifetime. If you buy something cheap, made from, a low-wage country, chances are you're going to buy that item 3 or 4 times over the course of 20 years and wind up costing more. Be more self-reliant. I think that's just generally an outlook in life to learn to be able to deal with situations on your own or fix problems, or sometimes that just comes down to getting along better, if possible, with your family or with friends, people that live under the same roof as you. Volunteer, helping other people. saying hello to strangers. I mean, these are little things that just kind of add, and they don't cost us except time and maybe a little effort. Volunteering is a good way to get into a particular environment that you are curious about, whether it's for a job or for a hobby or some type of a social group. Volunteering is a good way to also just network and meet other people. Working for somebody who's running for office. Go to campaign meetings, rallies, that sort of thing. Actually see and meet other people, hopefully with similar interests or people with different interests, to kind of broaden our perspective on certain issues. Run for local office. School board is a good choice, especially if you have children in your school district. Board of Selectmen, Justice of the Peace. Justice of the Peace actually involves responsibilities in setting up elections, voting stations, and counting ballots. Justices of the Peace have a role in making sure that the voting goes problem-free, and that everybody's vote counts, and it just counts once. So there are ways of kind of contributing in a small way on a grassroots level, on a local level, and dealing with what sometimes is overwhelming news, and I think sometimes people just get very frustrated and they kind of withdraw. I think that the best thing to do is, as I said, to be a little bit more active on a grassroots, a local level. And if you come across a candidate that you would like to see in office or brought back to office that shares your values, then find a way to support that person, either with time or through a monetary donation. Anyway, that's it for today. We touched on a lot of different things, but mostly my concern, and I think it's a concern shared by many, the potential for overreach in seriously inflicting damage on people's livelihoods, and definitely on what they spend for energy, and that goes into heating their home, heating their water, buying their food because of what's transported, and that's it. And Oliver's asleep. All right, so there you go. Time to wake up. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I'm not sure when we'll be back on the air, perhaps next Thursday at 5:45, but I hope I've given you some food for thought, and if you get a chance, look for other sources of information or news, but don't spend too much time with it. Sometimes it's other than voting, there's very little we can do aside from some of the other items that I've mentioned, which will help us live our life a little bit more independently, with a little bit more liberty and control over what we eat and the environment in which we live, and also hopefully raise our level spiritually in having more of a balanced lifetime experience. So anyway, take care, and hopefully take advantage of the opportunities on Monday, this coming Monday at the library, and also the July 30th from 4 to 7 at the Living Hope Church. There's going to be a forum of candidates from 4 to 7. And hopefully if you make it, you'll hear someone and ask them questions, and perhaps find someone that you would support in the coming election. So take care. God bless.